Hey everyone, this is Mary Melody Marquez and welcome back to Unmuted. So, if you have ADHD, I want to ask you a question and I want you to answer it honestly in your head. When you forget a deadline, look at a messy room you can't just bring yourself to clean, what is the very first thing you say to yourself? Is it, oh, I made a mistake? Or is it, what is wrong with me? Why am I like this? Why can't I just be normal? If your brain immediately jumps to the second option, you're not just dealing with the executive dysfunction of ADHD. You are carrying the heavy, invisible weight of ADHD shame. Before we go any further, we need to understand the difference between two very distinct emotions, guilt and shame. Guilt says, I did a bad thing. It focuses on behavior. If you forget a friend's birthday, guilt says, man, I messed up. I should apologize. And guilt can actually be a healthy motivator for change. Shame, on the other hand, says, I'm a bad person. It doesn't focus on the action, it attacks your identity. When an ADHD brain forgets a birthday, shame whispers, you're a terrible, selfish, unlovable friend. I remember when I forgot Nanai's first death anniversary, I just felt so horrified. How can I forget such an important date? But I did. I had a lot going on. I was in school and I just didn't remember, but I had a lot of shame behind it. Because ADHD affects our executive function, which also means the ability to regulate time, attention, emotions, and impulses, we make a lot of mistakes in a world built for neurotypical brains. And because we make so many mistakes, we stop experiencing situational guilt and start living in a permanent state of identity level shame. A child with ADHD often hears, sit still, pay attention. Why can't you just listen? I just told you this a moment ago. Why can't you remember? You have so much potential if you just try harder. Even if these things are said by loving parents or well-meaning teachers, an ADHD child absorbs them as gospel truth. In their minds, they're telling themselves, there's a lot wrong with me. And by the time you reach adulthood, that external criticism has successfully converted into a loud, brutal, nonstop inner critic. Now you might wonder, why does this hurt so much worse for me than it seems to for other people? The answer lies in your nervous system. So people with ADHD experience a phenomenon called rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. RSD is an intense, overwhelming emotional pain triggered by the perception, real or imagined, of rejection, criticism, or failure. So when a neurotypical person gets a piece of constructive feedback at work, it might sting for a few minutes, but when someone with ADHD, like me, gets that same feedback, their nervous system registers it as a physical threat. And when I tell you, the panic that sets in when I get an email saying, hey, don't forget to do this, and God bless my boss, it's just a reminder email, right? But in my brain, it's automatic panic. It's a threat. It can trigger a full-blown fight or flight response. And shame isn't just an abstract thought in my head, it's visceral, and it's an agonizing physical reaction in my body. So why does this happen? In an ADHD brain, the prefrontal cortex, this is the area responsible for logic, planning, and emotional regulation. It has a hard time communicating with the amygdala, the brain's emotional smoke detector. So when an emotion like shame hits, it completely hijacks the ADHD brain. There's no filter to say, hey, it's just a missed email or it's just something that you forgot in your process. It really isn't the end of the world. Instead, the emotional floodgates open and you're entirely consumed by that feeling that you are failing at life. And this same goes for relationships, friendships. So have you ever noticed that when you try to sit quietly or meditate, your brain instantly turns into a courtroom where you're on trial for every mistake you've made since 2008? That is called default mode network. In neurotypical brains, when they start a task, the DMN or default mode network turns off. In ADHD brains, the DMN doesn't shut down properly. It stays active, meaning while you're trying to do your taxes or fold laundry, your brain is simultaneously running a background program reminding you of your flaws. Your biology makes it incredibly easy to default to shame. And this is an issue that I have at home. Me and my partner would be watching a show on TV, and my brain will signal something like, girl, you forgot to pay your bill. And now I'm trying to look for my phone or my laptop because I need to pay that bill, forgetting that I'm actually spending time with my partner right now watching a show. So when shame becomes our default state, we develop coping mechanisms to survive it. See if you recognize yourself in any of these 4 common coping mechanisms. So the first is masking. This is when you expend an exhausting amount of mental energy to appear totally normal, totally organized and put together. You become a perfectionist because you believe that if you're perfect, no one can see the chaotic truth. You arrive an hour early to appointments because you're terrified of being late. You over-prepare for meetings. But masking is a ticking time bomb. I feel like your ADHD makes you a burden to others. You try to buy your security in relationships by saying yes to everything. You overcompensate. You take on extra work, you become that reliable friend, and you completely ignore your own boundaries. All to outrun the fear that if you mess up even once, people will leave you. It's so sad. The third phase is avoidance. So shame tells you if you try, you're just going to mess up like you always do. So to protect yourself from the pain of failure, your brain paralyzes you. You avoid opening the mail. You avoid looking at your bank account. You avoid starting that big project. To the outside world, it looks like laziness or procrastination, but on the inside, it is a sophisticated defense mechanism against anticipated shame. Fourth phase is anger. When the threat of shame hits, sometimes the fight or flight response chooses fight. Guilty. If a partner gently says, hey, you forgot to take out the trash, the shame is so painful that you instantly flip into defense mode. Your brain is like, fight, 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 fight. And so verbally, you're like, why are you always nagging me? I do everything around here. You're attacking me. Instead of saying, oh, you're right, let me do that now. Thanks for the reminder. You attack to avoid feeling exposed. It damages relationships, leaving you feeling even more isolated and ashamed. So these coping mechanisms lead directly into the vicious cycle of ADHD burnout. Let's map it out so you can see how it traps you. So there's the trigger. You have a task to do, either cleaning the kitchen, writing a report, studying for a big test like me. That's the trigger. The memory of past failure. Your DMN kicks in and reminds you of all the times you've struggled with this task before. Shame enters the room before you even begin. And then there's task paralysis. The emotional weight makes a task feel physically impossible. You freeze. You scroll on your phone for 3 hours just so you can numb the discomfort. And then there's the crash. The deadline passes or the mess gets worse. Then there's self-blame. Your inner critic screams, see, I told you, you're lazy. You have no discipline. And then the next trigger comes. You promise to do better, but next time through sheer willpower. But because you haven't fixed the underlying emotional loop, the cycle repeats itself. If shaming yourself worked, you would be the most successful, organized person on the planet by now. You've tried beating yourself up for years and it hasn't cured your ADHD. And why is that? Because shame causes stress. Stress floods your brain with cortisol, and cortisol freezes the prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain you need to actually do the task. Shame doesn't motivate us. It literally paralyzes us. So how do we break the cycle? How do we stop acting out of shame and start living out of self-compassion? It requires rewiring the narrative. The first step is learning to separate your identity from your biology. You need to shift your language from I'm broken to my brain struggles with executive dysfunction. Treat your ADHD like a physical accommodation, not a moral failing. So when you feel the physical wave of shame hit your body, practice the 2-step self-compassion break. So step 1, I want you to acknowledge the pain without judgment. Say to yourself, this feels incredibly heavy right now. I'm spiraling into shame and it hurts. Step 2, offer yourself a micro dose of kindness. Ask yourself, what would I say to a friend or a child who just made this exact same mistake? You would never tell a friend that they're unlovable because they forgot an appointment. Extend that same basic human decency to yourself. Step 3, stop trying to build a neurotypical life. Create shame-free scaffolding for your ADHD brain. If you can't fold your laundry, stop forcing yourself to do it. Get open bins. Throw your shirts in one, pants in another, and call it a day. If you keep forgetting to eat vegetables because they rot in the crisper drawer, move them to the fridge door where you can see them. Guilty. If you can't get through a long task, do it for 5 minutes while blasting your favorite music. You have to accept your brain's quirks. So as we close out this episode together, I want to leave you with a thought. You don't need to cure your ADHD to be worthy of respect. You don't have to wait until your house is perfectly clean, your inbox is at 0, or your life is seamlessly organized to love yourself. Radical acceptance means looking at your beautifully chaotic, creative, sometimes messy brain and saying, I'm allowed to take up space exactly as I am. So the next time someone drops a passive-aggressive comment, or the next time your own brain tries to tell you to shrink, mask, or hide, remember that your worth is non-negotiable. It is not tied to a scale, an inbox, a checklist, or a neurotypical standard. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. If this resonated with you, share it with another neurodivergent soul who might be drowning in shame right now. This is Mary Melody Marquez, and I'll see you next time.